Good afternoon and welcome to today's Stahls TV broadcast, Heat Press Buying Guide. I'm your host Josh Ellsworth and I look forward to spending the next hour with you walking you through what to look for in a heat press and how to make a great investment in a quality heat press. So we have a lot of tools and things to go over today, and we're trying something new. We actually have a handout that's part of the GoToWebinar window over in the right-hand section of your screen, and you can download that handout to see some of the products that we'll be using today in the session, product names and links. You can get over to the website if you'd like to invest in any of the presses that we cover or any of the accessories that we'll cover that I'll go through here today. But before we kick things off in official Stahls TV style, we like to launch a couple poll questions to get an idea of who we have attending today. And one of those first questions we want to launch is, do you own a heat press? Simple yes or no answer to this one, so we can see if you're looking to buy your second or third heat press or your very first one. As always, you can ask questions throughout today's presentation, and we'll stop it several times. Karen's helping me facilitate the session today, and so we'll stop several times for your questions. And Karen, what are the response to that?
75% answered yes, and 25% answered no.
Okay, excellent. And then before we move on to the actual presentation, the question is, how many items do you expect to heat press per week? And this can be how many you're actually pressing or ramping up to press, but please take your time and answer this as truthful as possible on how many items you expect to press per week, because it's going to guide a lot of the discussion and presentation here today. So we'll give you a few more seconds to complete that as you're reading down through the answers until we have about 80% of the audience that has voted, and then we'll close it off. What do we have?
25% 49 or less, 25% 50 to 150, 25% 151 to 300, and 25% 301 plus.
Ding, ding, ding. We hit the jackpot. Everybody wins a free heat press. Just joking. But that's the first time I ever had equal numbers. So thanks to all four of you that voted. No, just joking. So we have a good range. And so we'll walk through heat presses, but the first question you have to ask yourself is, what are you looking for in a heat press? Why are you actually buying a heat press? And the answer to that question for most of you would be to customize or to print items. Ultimately, that's the primary function of the heat press. So you want a heat press that's going to deliver to your business the most versatility and functionality as far as what it can actually make. And then you also want to look for the accuracy at which it makes it. So those will be our top two considerations that we review today as we're going through the line of Hotronix heat presses. And we're going to start over with the Hotronix Fusion press, which happens to be my favorite heat press that we have out there on the market. And let's cover this one. So one of the first considerations when you're looking at a press is, how does it operate from a functionality standpoint, the ease of use. There are two basic styles of heat presses out there on the market. There are those that close like a clamshell, which we'll show you momentarily, and there are those that swing away. This Hotronix Fusion press is a swing away press as well as a draw press, which means it draws out from the bottom. Now, when you're first comparing the features and benefits of those two styles and their functionality, there's a couple key things to consider from an easier operation standpoint. Number one is, when you're working with a swing-away press, you have full access to the platen without the heat being over top of you. So this not only allows for a heat-free workspace, but it also allows for a better layout and being able to see directly over top of the item for placement. So if you're just starting in heat pressing and you have a fairly low quantity of stuff that you want to press per week, if you answered on the lower side, a swing-away press is great for that, because it's going to give you the time to press it and also the ease of layout and operation. Now, if I were to sort of contrast that with the clamshell style, the real negative of a swing-away style, number one is it uses more space. As you notice, the heat press swings all the way around behind, so you need to have some space behind the machine. Otherwise, with this one, you just operate it as a draw, so it operates within its own footprint. But the clamshell closes within its own footprint, so it's really a one-step operation. With the swing away, I have to swing it away, swing it back, ultimately lock the press down, and then open that press when it's finished. So quite a few steps to complete the operation versus a clamshell, which is simply close and open, sometimes not even open if it's an auto release press. But operationally, that's just sort of creature comfort and what you like, but as I mentioned earlier, accuracy is perhaps at the top of the list, because ultimately you'll have a lot of folks that will invest in a heat press for $200 or $300 off of eBay, or my favorite latest one is where they throw in a free heat press with the purchase of a vinyl cutter. Basically, with those sort of throwaway inexpensive heat presses, you're asking for problems. I would highly recommend you spend the extra $1,000 or couple $1,000s to invest in a quality heat press, and what you're really going to get for that is accuracy and time, temperature, and pressure, and you're going to get the longevity of the machine. So when you're looking for a heat press, every heat transfer comes with recommendation. It's going to tell you the time it takes, under what temperature, also under what pressure, in order to heat press that accurately. So if I get a transfer such as this glitter flake material, this will come to you cut, ready to apply from a large variety of suppliers, including Stahls as a choice, and it will have specific recommendations. So I always use the analogy, the heat press is your oven and the transfer is your frozen pizza. You simply need to follow the instructions on your frozen pizza on what to set the oven for. If you get that far and your heat press is accurate on time and temperature and pressure, then you'll be very far ahead of the game. So specifically how these presses measure time, temperature, and pressure, let's go through that. Number one is time is very simple. When you lock the press down, there's a timer on the front screen that you can program the amount of time that you want on any style of Hotronix press. And when you lock that press down, the timer engages and you'll hear the audible beep when it's complete, prompting you to either open it or it opens itself. The next key thing is temperature. So not all heat presses are created equal when it comes to temperature. Timer, fairly simple. You can count down the seconds and say, yeah, that's accurate. That was 10 seconds, it beeped. Great, but temperature is a little bit different. You'll see a lot of older style presses out there that'll have sort of the meat thermometer on the front of them. Those aren't accurate any longer. There are 5 to 10 degree variants because it's actually taking the temperature measurement just from that one single point on the heat press. Whereas when you work with these digital heat presses, they have an RTD probe that actually comes and measures the temperature of the heater, which is underneath on this swing away style press. So you're getting an accurate reading from the actual right behind the surface of the heater, and it's communicating constantly with the control board. So if you press a hooded sweatshirt and it pulls some heat out, it's responding, reacting, and reheating back to the set temperature that you've set. With an accurate heat press, such as a Stahls Hotronix, you'll have a micro-wound heating element throughout this whole upper heater on the press, which basically guarantees even temperature throughout this platen. So the temperature it says on the control board is within a 2 to 5 degree variance of what it's actually reading on any corner, any edge of this press, which is very important. Heat presses of old, or some of the inexpensive heat presses, they cheap out on heating element, and basically you end up with what's called cold spots in the press where there's no heating element, and basically that equals ruined transfers. Because if you don't press at the right time, temperature, and pressure, you compromise quality, which ultimately leads to returns, damaging your business name, and it's really not worth cheapening out on a heat press, as you'll see later when we go through a sort of cost scenario on what you can make with one of these machines. So that's time, temperature, and the next is pressure. So pressure, let's start with what the machine does for you, and then we'll talk about really what you need to do to ensure accurate pressure. So pressure relates to how much actual pressure or force is exerting down from the head of the heater onto the actual base of what you are pressing. So I'll step off screen for a moment and grab a t-shirt, because as you're looking to measure pressure, you should always do so with a t-shirt or something loaded, whatever you plan to print on your machine. So load your blank wearable onto the heat press. Make sure the seams, collars, everything is off of the edge of the press, and then basically we're going to lock it down. Now this particular press, the Hotronix Fusion, as well as the Hotronix Auto Clam, has a pressure readout. It basically indicates a number when you lock it down on the control board from 0 to 9. 0 to 3 being a light pressure, 4 to 6 being a medium, 7, 8, 9 being a heavy. So once you get that transfer, it's going to tell you light, medium, or heavy pressure. load your item, and dial in that pressure, light, medium, or heavy. So if I lock this down right now, it's reading a 0. These Stahls presses have what's called over-the-center pressure adjustment. Basically, I have a knob here that I'm going to turn clockwise to increase the pressure. Basically, it's just lowering the heater, or counterclockwise to decrease the pressure or raise the heater. So I turned it a couple turns clockwise. Now when I lock it down, it's reading a 4 on my pressure readout. So if 4 to 6 is my range, if I want it to be a 5, I'll give it another little quarter turn, lock it down. Now it's reading a 5. I'm ready to run my entire medium pressure job at that 5. I don't need to adjust it again if I'm pressing, a few dozen shirts. I run them all. It's locked in, ready to go with my settings. So pressure and having something that reads pressure is a heck of a lot better than where we were 6 or 7 years ago, where you had to guess, how does it feel? Is this a light pressure? Is this a medium? Is this a heavy? And a lot of it was based on elbow grease and feel, which varied per operator, ultimately producing bad quality heat transfer results, especially with the new technical adhesives that are out there and everything you can print. So having a press that accurately reads pressure is very big. Now, a lot of presses out on the market will read time, temperature, and pressure, just as I've shown you. Now, where we find the issue with the most errors and the biggest quality issue is really an operator error on pressure, is you don't get your item flat. So in order for time, temperature, and pressure to work, the assumption of the heat press is that you can load your item and get it flat. So I put, outside of accuracy, I put loadability or versatility sort of as number 1 when you're shopping and looking for what heat press to buy. So when I talk about loadability and getting your item flat on this t-shirt, which is a pretty large style, I mean it's a youth shirt, but it's a boxy cut, it's very easy to split this and thread it onto the press. Basically, we call it threading. You split it and you thread it on the press, and that's ensuring you get one single layer and you get nice even pressure. Now if it's a basic t-shirt, yeah, if it's a little easier for you, you can just lay the shirt on the press, draping the collar over the back edge of the heat press, line up your transfers and go. But as you start to get into slimmer cut shirts or different constructions of apparel, you start to run into more issues. So I'm going to grab another shirt off screen to show you this. So we grab a slimmer shirt like this fan jersey from Sanmar, and when we go to split this one open, it's tough. It's really stretching the shirt to get it to fit on the press, and it's going to cause issues with puckering when I apply it. So it's very difficult to get this type of shirt flat and have any issues. So the idea here is, I can lay it out, I can print the front, and let me zoom in a little bit. I'm going to switch over to my overhead cam. So I can lay the shirt out, I can print the front, but you see I have all these seams from the edge and also the collar up on the press. Even when I go to drape it over, I still have a lot of the construction of the shirt there. Now it's even more complicated. If I go to do a back print on this, I have seams, I have the V-neck causing potential print through issues where I would put the name bar across the top of the shirt. That's why threadability is a really big deal. So when you're shopping for a heat press, look at one that you can change the bottom attachment on, and I can swap this out. It's just a pin registered system. The pin goes right through this hole, and there's just a little latch underneath there that makes it very quick and easy. I'm going to set that 16 by 20 attachment to the side, which is a standard attachment on an industry standard large heat press. And now I'm going to load my 11 by 15 attachment and lock it into place. This gives me the ability to now print this smaller cut shirt by threading it. So now I'm able to turn the shirt upside down. I can split it and heat print the back, knowing that the V-neck and my collar is hanging below the platen, not causing any pressure issues. So basically, if I had that V-neck on here, or if I just lay the shirt out, those raised areas are not only going to absorb my pressure, but it's going to cause heat press marks to show up in the garment. I'll see the light trace of that V-neck if I'm not threading and getting a single layer onto the press. So when it comes to different shirt styles, threadability is key in understanding what your heat press can and cannot accept from a loading standpoint. Now another sort of big deal for threadability is when you start to deal with unique application areas. So if we want to press the front of a hoodie, the idea that we can turn this attachment sideways, now we can load our item on, letting our pocket drape off of the edge to get a nice flat and even pressing area. This is a big deal. Now if I wanted to print the side of this hood or a unique placement, there's even more options available. Take off my attachment. That was an 11 by 15 attachment, one of the most popular ones, and I can load a 6 by 10. Now I'm able to load the side of the hood onto the press with everything draping off and get a full placement on the side of the hood without any seams or issues in my way. So from a wearable standpoint, this loadability is absolutely critical to getting accurate heat transfer results. Now, in addition to just being able to load standard items, another key thing to look for is being able to have the versatility to print more. We have a question, a poll question I want to launch as I'm swapping out this platen that asks what markets do you plan to reach or are you currently reaching with your heat press or with your decorated apparel business. So we'll take a second and launch that. And we said primary markets, if you can just select one, and then let's close that off and share the results with me if you will.
50% answered schools, 33% answered businesses, 17% said other, and 0% for teams and leagues and retail.
Okay, good. So the majority of our marketplace is wanting to reach schools. So I'll use schools as the analogy. If you walk into a school with a standard flat heat press without attachments, there's only so many items that you can sell. But if you invest a little bit more in a heat press with this sort of interchangeability on the fly quickly, then all of a sudden I expand my sales items far beyond basic t-shirts. So what I've loaded now is what's called a leg and sleeve platen, a very popular application for pretty much any market, whether it's schools, teams and leagues, could even be dance or fitness, is a side pan application. So the idea that I can do a 6 by 20 inch long application onto a pant leg or a sleeve with the standard heat press. There's no fumbling with special inserts and pillows and pads. It's absolutely critical. You just load it, lay your transfer down, and heat press it for the recommended time, temperature, and pressure. Now, just to complete an actual application for you, one of the things you want to do, of course, I mentioned, is load your item. And you always want to dial in that pressure for the particular item you have loaded. In this case, the sweat pant material is a little bit thicker. And then I'm going to place my transfer down the side. This particular product happens to be a product we call Clear Matte, and it's from our Stahls Tech line. This one presses at 280 to 320 degrees, and it takes 10 seconds. And it's what's called a cold peel. That's sort of the last element of your heat transfer. It's going to tell you whether you want to peel it hot, warm, or cold. Cold meaning, ideally you would remove this from the heat press, let it cool down before you peel the backing. So I'll just fold it over here so we can maintain a nice look at it. Kind of cool it down, and then I'll peel that momentarily. But you start to see the ease of which I loaded those pants on. Okay, so that's cooling off if I load the side. How quick it is to load. So it's not only that you can print more items with the heat press that's versatile, but you can print more items per hour. Even if you're not a high volume business, maximizing your throughput on how long it takes you to print a job, even if you're only printing 36 pieces a day, you want to get those 36 pieces done as quickly and accurate as possible so you can move on to the other duties that you have to do with your job there. So this should be cooled down enough. So I'll peel the backing off. And you can see it has that sort of laser etch look to it on that particular transfer style. But the idea here is you can quickly and easily load a wide variety of items and heat print those with the right attachment. Something I want to call attention to, and this is how the Fusion differs a little bit from the autoclam, and one of the reasons I say it'll print more than any other heat press, is actually the underneath of the press. Let me see if I can zoom in and get a nice angle here for you. I'm going to zoom in. Let me just come down a notch. If you look at this part of the press, you see how narrow it is underneath the machine. This is a very thin piece. It's about 5 inches wide by about, I'd say, 2 inches deep. And what that does when you load an attachment like the leg and sleeve, it allows you to thread and split even the smallest openings over this. So it's also particularly beneficial when you start to heat press different types of bags, where I can load my 6x10 attachment on. And that's so narrow when it comes to printing different items, I can take a bag, a relatively small area, and be able to load it on. So I'm just grabbing a bag here off the rack. So even when there's a narrow opening, being able to split that and thread it on to my press is going to make life easier. That way I'm getting rid of these straps or any items. I got a completely flat single layer surface here to press. If you've ever tried to heat print jackets, or you want to heat print jackets, sometimes they have the little unzippable area. It's called a hoop pocket for embroidering. Well, the hoop pocket works great for threadability as well, when I can unzip that on a jacket and thread it onto one of these small attachments. So 6x10 attachment, if you're purchasing one of these heat press, is a very good attachment. Another one that I like is the 7-inch round. If you're doing any sports applications, which I know not a whole lot of feedback came in for sports, but this is great for the sort of top shoulder TV numbers on a football jersey. Also, Karen, I know you love the bucket hats. This will press right on top of a bucket hat or any types of those items. So a lot of versatility because you have the narrow throat design of this Hotronix Fusion heat press. So it's really about what you can print with the press is equally as important as what accuracy does the press deliver. What questions do we have? No questions? You guys are a quiet group today, so if you have them, feel free to ask them. I'm going to flip over to my clam heat press. So this is the Hotronix Auto Clam, and we're getting a nice view as well of the dual air fusion heat press beside it, and then the air fusion right here. So if you're not a big fan of the manual swing away and manual close on the Fusion, it's a $1,950 press, by the way, on the Fusion. Once you start to add all the attachments, you can get packages for somewhere around $2,600. If you want to jump into automatic functionality with the Air Fusion, you jump more up into the $4,000 price point. But the auto clam that we see here has some definite advantages as well. Number one is you got a over-center pressure adjustment, just like the Fusion heat press. When you lock it down, it has the digital pressure display. It also has digital time and temperature, so I can hit the mode button, adjust my temperature, and I can also adjust my timer. This particular one has dual timers. Basically, that means you can program a preheat and an actual application. So if you want a preheat of a couple seconds and then an actual application, you can do that. When you lock it down, it will begin to count down to 0, and then it's going to automatically open when it completes. So very quick, very easy. If you're just doing a ton of t-shirts and that's all you're doing, if you have a big business in a certain item that is a t-shirt or a shirt style and you're not worried about printing bags, sleeves, legs, this is very fast. A lot of people that invest in auto clams are those that are doing a single step layout. So if you're doing a screen printed transfer, I can just lay it down, lock it, and go, and often one operator can operate multiple heat presses if you're doing a lot of volume. Now this has a lot of the same functionality of the Fusion in that it has the digital time, temperature, and pressure. Now it doesn't have the fancy control board where I can do presets like I can do on the Fusion, but it does have the quick change attachments. This one has a lever. I simply unlock it and I can slide out my attachments. Once again, I'm looking at a fairly narrow throat, but this one is going to be wider than the actual Fusion. So if we look at this here, I'll just take a little stop down, you can see we have this machine loaded onto a caddy. That's this floor stand. But you can see the footprint of the press is sitting within the caddy. So instead of only a 5-inch wide area, I have somewhere around 8 or 9 inches wide. For this reason, it makes it difficult to heat press sleeves and legs. But if I want to load an 11 by 15 platen and do youth shirts, if I have a fairly wide open bag, I can still interchange all these other attachments and be able to load my items on and thread them. So very versatile as far as functionality, but not quite as versatile as the Fusion as far as all of these unique items. Now while we're there at the heart of the press, let me just show you a couple interesting applications that work with either the Fusion or the autoclam. We have what's called a hat bill platen. This is a fairly new style of platen. It will allow you to load a hat bill onto it to print the underbill of hats. So this one has been popular. These underbill of hats have been a tremendous sales opportunity. You can actually flip it inside out, the hat. So I'm just flipping the whole hat inside out here. And now I can print the top side as well. So a lot of versatility in this attachment. It will also allow me to print the back location and the side. Now if you want to print the front crown of a hat, you'll definitely have to have a cap press separate from your normal heat press. But this is a great way to add a little bit of customization with embroidery or something like that. Likewise, we've invented all sorts of attachments, including a shoe attachment. And something else we just discovered is that you can actually press shoes on this hat bill attachment as well, making it a bit more of a Swiss Army attachment. So in addition to shoes, I can do short sleeves as well on t-shirts. Not only just one short sleeve, but I can load a couple up at a time and press 2 logos on a pair of sleeves. So a lot of versatility. If you have a shirt with a tearaway tag and you're putting in your own label, it's very easy to get to the back label part. So there's a lot of different things you can do with the heat press, but it's all about having the right attachments and the versatility to do it. Just before I leave this press, let me show you the shoe platen as well if you want a dedicated platen for the job. Drop in the shoe attachment, and now you can load up a pair of shoes at once and heat print the sides. So we have a lot of unique attachments for the job, a lot of different things you can do with a heat press. Now, just to dive in a little bit more on this autoclam, if we just take a look down, this is the floor caddy. It comes with the self-leveling casters. It's a 2-piece, it bolts right together, and basically what we're doing by having this floor caddy is we are making the autoclam have a cantilever design. So rather than having to try to squeeze my shirt on over the press, I can simply buy an extra attachment, whether that's the freestanding caddy that can be rolled around to the job, or there's a counter-base caddy that basically raises the press, gives it that cantilever design, so I have that threadability of my t-shirts, which is extremely important for getting rid of those seams and print through. Especially as the market begins to change through printing performance wear and all sorts of unique items, it's important that you have 100% threadability. So just being able to split it halfway won't do the job. What other questions do we have, Karen? 0 questions. Okay. Let me just take a glance at my notes to make sure I've covered what I wanted to. Okay, so we talked about buying for accuracy. We covered time, temperature, and pressure. We talked about looking for capability. What does it print? Understanding ease of operation, so you understand the ease of layout on a swing-away style versus the ease of one-step lockdown on a clamshell style. From a speed standpoint, there's a couple different things. One is just being able to quickly change the attachments and load items, but you probably also notice when I'm splitting and threading those items onto the press, you have an accessory that's very important. It's called a quick slip pad protector. This is sort of like an ironing board cover for your heat press platen, and it's made of a non-stick material, so it makes it very easy to slide those garments on and off. And if you already own a heat press, you really should have this quick slip pad protector on the press. It's in our handout as well, and we sell them for all different sizes of presses. We don't sell them for the small attachments because typically the surface of this is very easy to split and load something onto a small attachments. You only need them on the larger attachments. Some other ways to get speed and accuracy are with other tools such as a laser alignment system. So we have a laser alignment system that can be added to any style of press, basically shoots 4 crosshair lasers. We have complete video tutorials on this on stahlstv.com, but it makes layout a breeze for doing a large quantity of jobs and hitting the same application. And then of course, last but not least, you want to consider warranty and support. The presses I've shown you today are at the higher end of the Stahls line. They carry 5-year warranties, and there's a toll-free support for you, 1-800 number that's open 24/7, 365 days a year. So if the press goes down, typically it's a phone repair issue. You can get back up and running very quickly. Question? 2 questions. Okay, let's go for it.
The first question is, what advice do you have with heat presses for pressing rhinestones? And secondly, do all of the platens have Teflon covers?
Okay, so let me take the do all the platens have Teflon covers first. Pretty much from 11 by 15 up, yes, you can get them. 11 by 15 inch and up, you can get them. If it's a 6 by 10, 7-inch round, they're not available. You don't really need them at that point. As far as the press for rhinestones, the same sort of applies. With rhinestones, the key is you want to be able to generate a firm pressure in most cases. So you just want to make sure you have a press that can generate good pressure with minimal effort. And either of these presses will do that for you. Really, rhinestones are usually pre-lined up on the carrier sheet, so placements not too difficult at all. When you're pressing rhinestones, the one other tip I'll give you is you always want to, 1, preheat your lower platen before you start pressing for 60 seconds because it's tough to get through the rhinestone to the adhesive on the actual press. And then 2, when you're pressing rhinestones, this thing's talking to me. 2 is when you're pressing rhinestones, you want to make sure if you're mixing that with other materials that rhinestones are typically the last step because rhinestones add depth to your transfer, to your garment. So it's very tough to add something after the stones because rhinestones will absorb the pressure because it's a raised area. And remember, we want a flat area for pressing. Any other questions? Okay. From an accessory standpoint, we talked a little bit about the quick slip protectors. We talked about the laser alignment system, the option of the caddy and the counter caddy. The Fusion does not have a stand option, so the Fusion comes in a cantilever design automatically. If you want a Fusion on the stand, you need to jump up to the Air Fusion. And then lastly, when you start to talk about different cover sheets and accessories, there's a few different items there. There is what's called craft paper, which is your brown paper that basically leaves a matte finish on the material. Then there's also non-stick material made of Teflon. This is another cover sheet option that leaves more of a semi-gloss to a gloss finish on your transfer. You can really use the craft paper, which is this sheet, or the Teflon interchangeably. I tend to use the craft paper more often just because I think it's easier to handle and lay on the shirt versus the Teflon, which is a little more difficult for me when I'm heat pressing. There is also something called a flexible application pad. That's an optional cover sheet. This is a gray rubberized pad, and typically this is best used for heat sensitive items that aren't going to be laundered because this will absorb heat out of your application. So items like bags, maybe shoes, this is great for because it'll help keep that item from melting or scorching if it's heat sensitive, and it'll protect it. But don't use it on items that are going to be laundered unless you do some testing to dial in the application. So that's a flexible application pad. And then the last point I want to point out is the difference between platens and pillows and pads in general. So another way, instead of threading your item to make it printable, to raise it up to get flat pressure, is to insert something into the item to raise the print area up. So I should show you that just to make sure everybody's with me and understands that. Let me load this 16 by 20 attachment and I'll move your camera angle over here. So if we take something like this 16 by 20 attachment and this bag from earlier that I wanted to print on it, if you can't print, there we go. If you can't get this item flat on there and avoid these straps, a lot of people will take the option of inserting a pad. This is a rubberized Print Perfect pad. It's made of the same material as the base of your heat press. It's on the lower platen, so it's very good. In that case, you can just insert that to raise the print area. And that will allow you to lay out your transfer. Of course, you'll have to dial back the pressure on your heat press accordingly counterclockwise to raise the heater to accommodate that extra thickness, but that will allow you to print that area without an issue. Now, obviously, we'd rather not be fumbling with pads and pillows when I can just load it correctly on a platen. Also, there's less risk with other items coming in contact, but a pillow is another option. I could also insert a pillow into this to raise that print area for pressing. So, when to use a pad versus a pillow. A pillow is really a low density surface, meaning I can press it in. There's not a whole lot of standing up to any pressure, so you can only generate a low to a medium pressure application on a pillow, whereas a pad I can generate a firm pressure. The rule of thumb is where you can use an interchangeable platen, life is easier, use it. Next best selection would be the Print Perfect pad, and third best choice would be the pillow. The only time the pillow is highly recommended is if you're going directly over a seam with your application or across buttons or something like that where you need it to sort of level out and sink in to the surface of the pillow. It's a little bit more forgiving from that standpoint. Any additional questions?
Carlos would like to know if you have rhinestones or even other designs that are different sizes, how do you accommodate for the pressure?
Okay. So if you have rhinestones that are different sizes, how do you accommodate for the pressure? And the short and simple answer would be as long as the rhinestone doesn't call for a very high pressure application, is to use a pillow, because they'll sort of level out and you'll get a nice even pressure if it's a light or medium pressure application. If they do call for a high pressure application, it's not exactly the best answer in the world, but erring on the side of more pressure and cranking it up would work in that case. By and large, a lot of people make the mistake of applying way too much pressure by cranking it up, so don't do that unless you really have an application that calls for it. Okay, so hopefully this gives you some ideas on what heat press to invest in, and which one will be best for your business. I don't think you can go wrong with either style, the AutoClam or the Fusion. My recommendation would be the Fusion, just because it can print a little more. It does take a few more extra steps, and if you have the money, of course, invest in the Air Fusion. It will take some of the steps out of it for you. We'd encourage you to log on to stahlstv.com to see the balance of the class schedule. For this month, we're done, but for December, there's a full schedule, and then we'll be publishing our new stuff over the next 10 to 15 days. Thanks for watching Stahls TV.